meeting to order. This is the City of Delaware Historic Preservation Commission, June 28, 2017 meeting. Could I have a roll call?
Mr. Coleman?
Present.
Mr. Nicely? Ms. Riviera?
Present.
Ms. Van Gundy? Councilman Rohr?
Here.
Vice Chairman Hatton? And Chairman Coke.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, because we only have 4 people tonight, per our HPC rules, we need a simple majority to pass a case. So you need 3 out of 4 to pass any case tonight.
Okay.
Well, what about if we have like 2.5 to 1.5?
That's not a simple majority.
You'll work it out among yourselves.
I'll make a motion to excuse the folks that are not present.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Rohr and a second by Mr. Coleman to excuse the 3 absent commission members. Hearing no discussion, call for a vote.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Councilman Rohr?
Yes.
Chairman Coke.
Yes. Item 2 on our agenda is approval of the motion summary of the HPC meeting held on May 24th, 2017. Have you had an opportunity to read the minutes, and are there any corrections or additions? Hearing none, can I have a motion for approval for the motion summary of the May 24th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Coleman, second by Ms. Riviera. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Riviera?
Yes.
Councilman Rohr?
Yes.
Chairman Coke.
Yes. Item 3 on our agenda, actually 3A, is applicant 2017-0306. It's a request national for a certificate of appropriateness for a security gate at 44 South Sandusky Street, which is zone B2 in the Central Business District and located in the downtown core of the Downtown Historic District overlay. Lance, do we have a?
Yeah, I got a quick update, staff report. Give you some background on this. Back in February of this year, they came in for a concept and formal review, and I think there were some suggestions that the HPC made to them. In April, we noticed they installed a gate out in front of the, this is the elevation of 44, the front elevation of 44. They installed a gate to that alcove to the right of the entrance, the main entrance. And we requested they come in and get official approval for that. And that's where we're at today. This is a picture of what the gate, the iron gate, looks like. And this is the spec of it. And I wasn't at the February meeting, but I understand that this is similar to what was suggested at that meeting by at least a few commission members.
No, it's not.
It's not, okay?
What several of us suggested, what I suggested, was that instead of installing an iron gate, which is a new architectural element, why not just move the door to the apartment to a new stud wall that they would build where this iron gate is now shown, and put the door to the apartment there, and then the alcove that is being misused would be part of the apartment and interior, and the problem would go away. And so that was my suggestion. And the next time I walked down the street and peeked in there, maybe a couple of weeks later, I saw this installation, and somehow I knew it would be on our agenda at a future meeting.
My understanding is, I think they had conversations with Dave and Diane, that the option that you presented, they financially, they weren't comfortable doing that financially. So this was the option they went with. The applicant obviously isn't here to present his case.
Who is the applicant?
So the owner is Scott Atwell.
Because the tenant was the one that came here, right?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
And we told him that he probably should go talk to the.
Yeah, Scott Outway is the applicant. We emailed the report to him. I tried to call him today. His voicemail isn't established. There's no voicemail, so.
I guess from my point of view, just as a personal opinion, this doesn't really offend, what they've installed here now doesn't really, it doesn't offend me as being inappropriate to the district. It's not as obtrusive as a gate across the main entrance would have been. I think, in my mind, this is now more of an issue of building code compliance than it is HPC architectural standards compliance, but I'd be interested in hearing what other commission members felt.
Well, I pretty much echo that. I mean, the only thing that offends me is, the only thing that offends me is that they went ahead and did it without getting the proper approvals, which, if it offended me visually, or I thought, was, blatantly, contrary to the historic guidelines, I'd say, it needs to go. But it is very unobtrusive. I didn't even notice it until somebody pointed out that it was there. So from that standpoint, I agree. If the city works out, any code issues, I mean, that's their bailiwick, then I don't have a problem with it. If in the process of working out the code issues, substantial change are made to it that changes the appearance to the point where it is then more obtrusive, then I would say then it is, something that we'd probably want to look at again. But other than that, I don't have a problem with it.
I agree with that. I was going to say that some of the things that I saw suggested to take care of code compliance, the egress, building code compliance issues could be pretty ugly. And so I'd like to reserve, as you
They
did.
still need approval from our building department. We didn't review this because it officially hasn't been approved by the commission yet. From a aesthetic
Well,
perspective, building code's a separate issue, obviously.
From a egress code standpoint, I mean, technically, if the building's on fire, you're out the door, you're outside the building, whether you're locked in by the iron gate or not.
Right.
Well, it's not that tall, you could climb over it.
Well, that's why I wonder if it's.
Well, then what's the point?
I wonder if it's solving the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
drunk college kids will climb over that if they want.
Or shoot through it.
Our understanding is that it's lessened it significantly, the issues out there.
It's hard to imagine how that would solve the problem, but who am I?
It's a visual thing.
Right.
I have no problem with it. I think it's fine. You don't even notice it.
Mhm.
Even if you're walking in the door of Olivina, you really don't even look that way.
Yeah.
What if the solution that they work out with the building department is to cover it with expanded sheet metal mesh?
That's a good story.
Then
Talking to Dave and Diane and Jerry, apparently there's an option where it'd be pretty innocuous to do what they need to do to make this work. It's just, they would have to do that. So there's an option that looks similar to what you see.
What would the mesh be for?
I'm sorry.
What would the mesh be for?
It would keep you from reaching through, but since it's only 54 inches high,
You gotta just
how
reach over.
just gonna reach over and turn the knob?
The knob is right at the top.
I know, it'll be interesting to see how the technical aspects of the fire egress code get dealt with on this case. I mean, this is an example of some of the things that come up that you would never expect to be an issue. And here it is, we're
Well,
spending time in a city meeting talking about it.
I think we could, I agree with staff's recommendation to approve it, but we could also add the proviso that any changes to the current fence or gate would have to have administrative approval.
Is that a motion?
I haven't made a motion yet, but that's what I was gunning toward.
I would have, I mean, it doesn't offend me much. I mean, it's less of a problem if they hadn't asked us first.
Somebody want to make a motion?
Sure, I'll take a run at it. I move with respect to case number 2017-0306-44, I move to approve it with staff recommendation number 1, that the applicant shall adhere to zoning and building code requirements, including a compliant locking mechanism if desired for this installation of the security gate at the location selected. And number 2, that any changes to this gate as currently presented to the HPC would be subject to administrative approval.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Coleman, second by Ms. Riviera. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Ms. Riviera,
Yes.
Councilman Rohr,
Yes.
Chair Pope.
Yes. Okay. Item 3B on the agenda, number 2016-2532, minor amendments and an informal review. So we won't be voting on this. This will be for informal communication. This is a request by 12 West LLC for minor amendments or informal review to the previously approved certificate of appropriateness for a new building located at 14 West William Street, which is Zone B2, the Central Business District, and located in the transitional subdistrict of the Downtown Historic District overlay. Applicant will present changes in a 3-dimensional model format the night of the meeting for consideration.
Yeah, just give you some background on this. Back last November, HPC approved the amended building at this location, and that's the slide I have in front of you. And there were several conditions which are in the minutes from the November 2016 meeting that included in your packet. Tonight, they're requesting a minor change to that approval. That's their intent. It's also / informal review, just depends on, I guess, how many questions you may have. So the hope is that it could be approved tonight, then we would approve any details administratively as we move forward. If that's your wish, that would be the optimal. If you don't feel comfortable with that, we'd bring it back for a COA with the elevations and the like at the next meeting, or at the next, when they submit the elevations at that time. Some of the highlights that staff noted from reviewing this 3D model last week was, we didn't have time to get it in the report, was they want to create a 5-foot setback from the western building, where there'd be a walkway in that area. This building would be set back about 17.5 feet from the sidewalk, where you're similar to a patio out front. There would be a gate out front. I don't think the model shows the gate. The roof would be sloped from east to west on this building. Instead of split face block on the 3 elevations, would be hardy plank would be installed on the south and the west sides, and on the north and on the rear, front and rear elevations. So those are the things that we would have highlighted that were different from the original approval. Real quick, so I think the applicant needs to present the other details tonight in front of for you to review.
The applicant is now seated. Dave, could you give your name and address for the audio record?
Sure. David DeStefano, 12 West William Street, Delaware, Ohio. I'm the owner of 12 West, and thank you for seeing me again.
Thank you for your continued attention to downtown.
You're welcome. It has been a difficult challenge, to say the least, in terms of what I've learned in the past year from the last time I've seen you. And as just quick background, as you all remember, last time I was here, I had a drawing that a 2-story building, patio back, similar to what we have now. Well, I got out a little ahead of myself, and my architect as well. We thought we could do this building within a budget that was reasonable, and it turned out that it was not.
Just depends on the definition of reasonable, doesn't it?
It does. It did not fit my definition of reasonable, and I don't think it would fit any realtor's definition of reasonable. And to give you a little bit of ballpark, that 2-story building I went out for 6 estimates from contractors, and the average bid was $600,000. Then I went, okay, so how do I figure out this puzzle? Was the next. So I went to a 1-story building, and then the average bid came back saying, I think 4 responded to that offer, was $400,000. And these numbers are without furnitures, fixture, or equipment. So that's a building without a bar stools, booths, fryers, anything like that. And that, just rounding up, that's probably about $100,000. So this also explains why that building has sat vacant for this long, because I own it and I don't want it sitting vacant, but I have to figure out the best financial mousetrap for it to work. Finally got to a point where I think I'll show you tonight, we're able to build something that's hopefully, it's not what we want. It may not be what you all want 100%, but I think we can do it. Number one, it'll get us most of the way there. We can do the whole thing. The reason we're asking for, I think there's 2 big changes. As Lance mentioned, one is the roof. There was, and I'll show you the model here in a second, but sort of in layman's terms, it was just a flat roof that went behind the building. That's going to be changed to a sloped, and that will save about $25,000 making that change. The other change would be, as Lance was looking at that image there on the left side, this will be the west wall. If we come off 5 feet, that will allow us not to put a double-sided fire-rated wall, We could put a single coming off that, and that will save us almost $90,000.
Which part of that is?
So maybe this is a good time to bring out
Oh,
the
yeah,
model.
absolutely.
And I should not go without recognition to Mr. Al Roop, who did this for us. He's such a good person and cares about the downtown community. So here's, hopefully everybody can see it as best they can, but.
I think he did them over months too.
Yes. So as you can see, this is what we're talking about right here. And we could put a gated fence here or here, but coming off that sort of 5 feet distance there will allow us to save almost 6 figures.
How come? I'm just curious.
Construction costs.
The rated wall.
Yeah, they're going from a double fire rated wall to a single.
Wow. Also serves as access to parking too, really.
It could. I didn't know how the commission would feel about that. I didn't want to sort of get ahead of myself, whether we, have fences or access or however, how sort of get your views on this. I know for me, it's sort of this is at minimum what I would need to move forward. We try to make it as best we could, like the old West End Grill. The front, the facade will pretty much be the same. Again, the roof will slope, and this opening here will happen. Pretty much everything else, it's a big word, everything, but should roughly be the same.
And you're not required to have the wall on the east side because you already own that, or
that will do, because we'll do that double-sided on this side. And the reason we chose one side over the other, maybe that's where you're going next with the questions, is we're actually on the interior here. We're going to connect the 2 restaurants. So you'll be able to move from one to the other.
Lance, would this be considered an addition to an existing building, or is this a new building with a new address and a new function?
My understanding from the applicant is this will be a separate building that'll just be connected interior.
It depends, I guess, who the author is. The state of Ohio will pay our sales tax as one restaurant. Okay, this will be considered one restaurant. We'll have one liquor permit. We'll cover both sides because of the interior access. From street level, it'll look like 2 different restaurants, though.
And there is a property line going through there. Is that remaining?
I think we've submitted to the county that should all be one now.
Be one? Okay.
I think so. I'd have to double check, because we had a little bit of, myself and Mr. Manos, I purchased this lot from him, and then he wanted a portion of the north end back, and we made that change so he could keep the portion of the north end. But again, this is pretty much all owned back to sort of the sidewalk behind Sun Thermal. Which sidewalk behind there is my property anyway, so that's where my property line will end.
And that's different from how it is now?
How it used to be. Yeah, Mr. Banks, his property line used to extend out further. I can't tell you how much further, but I think the end of his 9 North Sandusky from this way. It used to end, so we parceled off this section.
So what do you end up using the recess behind your old building for?
Can't see that, can't even, the door on this side.
So that won't be, there's no option for additional parking or anything?
Oh, no.
It's just pedestrian access, basically?
Correct. Yeah, you have 4 different property owners back there, as you probably know better than I. They have their parking
Every
issues.
corner in the downtown has that same,
Yeah.
almost every corner.
Yeah.
Is your plan to operate it as one restaurant, or do you think you'll be further ahead to operate it as 2 restaurants? And I'm not sure that has any bearing on our decision. I'm just curious.
Sure, no, happy to share with you our thoughts. We look at it as 2 separate concepts, 2 separate restaurants. What we're considering is sort of a sports bar, a family-style sports bar, but separate from 12 West. 12 West, I hesitate to say, as the owner, it's doing well as of today. You never know in the restaurant business, how your fortune's passed. So we didn't want to sort of mess with a good thing, if you will. And so this will be, but same staff, same owner, different concept.
I'm curious about one statement. You said that the roof pitch is going to change. I thought that on the 2-story building that you guys were considering earlier, that it also had a roof pitch from front to rear.
I don't recall that. You could be right. I don't
Okay.
recall.
Did I misunderstand, Lance, when you were presenting, though? I thought you said it went from east to west.
He's correct. Yeah, so it would be, again, it's Al's replica here doesn't show it. We didn't, but it would run from this would be the high end,
Okay.
and then it would kind of sort of come across, if you will, down this way. It would go from 11 feet to 16 feet on this side, sort of to match up with the roof on this line. And it would come down, so the front, you wouldn't see anything from the front. You would still just see what you see on that image there, except obviously the 5 feet. But it would slant behind
Actually
this.
is going to pitch from
East
east
to west.
to west,
Yes,
and the water's gonna.
It's gonna go in that 5-foot area.
Alley.
Right.
Pedestrian alley.
So in the model then, with the actual roof on the east side, it would be the same height from front to back,
yes,
as opposed to as represented in the model.
correct.
And then in the back, is
Uh,
looking at it from the back, then you're going to be looking at a trapezoid, basically.
Yeah, it'll pitch from, my geometry is not the best, but it'll pitch from 16 feet on this side to about 11 feet
Yeah.
on this side.
I'm not sure, I'm just kind of, in my mind, questioning how that would look, just from a visual standpoint when you're, because it is a fairly busy interior of that block. And I wonder if perhaps maybe having at least a false wall to at least obscure the fact that the roof, from the back elevation, that would at least obscure the fact that the roof is pitched, if you would find that, if that would be something you would be interested in entertaining.
I can tell you, we've spent about 6 months on this design, and we've tried to squeeze every sort of angle.
No,
we
and I
could.
understand that, and I realize that you're trying to find, a way to make it work, and, but I'm just thinking that's going to look to me, it's going to look very odd from the back.
I think all the roofs in the back are sort of different, so this will be different, this is slope different, Jack's is different. I don't see any continuity there, but
I don't know where you'd be walking to really notice
Oh,
it.
that's actually, I can tell you, I frequently go downtown and, well, but I mean, I don't necessarily look at roofs that don't look weird, but, but I can tell you that's a very frequently traveled area of the city for people coming in from, Franklin Street, that are going down to the center of downtown. The group of people that I come down every Thursday with, for instance, we cut through there. I mean, that's a very visible thing from, traffic. A lot of people use the alleyway on the west side of the collective. And that's going to be something that a lot of people are going to see. And that's why I'm just kind of concerned that I just can't visualize, I can't visualize that. And it looks, in my mind, it looks kind of
But from the front, you would
strange.
not know.
I don't think so, no.
From 11 feet to 16 feet is a 5-foot drop, and how wide is that, 16 feet? Roughly?
That's part of our challenge. We're only talking a lot 20 feet wide, 110 feet deep,
Yeah.
and you're only going to get less than 50 seats in the restaurant.
Yeah.
It's really a struggle to get the
No,
budget numbers
I
to
get
work.
that. I'm just thinking in the grand scheme of things, to at least maintain, the rear elevation as a straight line versus, having it slope with the roof would at least, I think somewhat, soften the angularity of that roof, or at least not make it so, intrusive. Because again, it's going to basically, you're going to have a trapezoid as your rear elevation. And I can't think of anywhere else that there's something like that downtown. And I agree that, there's a lot of different shapes and designs, especially when you're looking at them from the rear, but that seems to me that's going to be pretty unique.
I can tell you for this point, right now, as you know, it's a vacant lot and people see the side of our building,
Mhm.
and that's kind of an odd, kind of rises up like
Yeah.
and no one's really made any comments to us. And I say this, like we get about 5,000 people a month through our restaurant. So I think in a best case scenario, we'd love to do it. But to move forward and get something built, these are one of those things we couldn't do everything that we'd like to do.
If that issue is a significant issue to you or any other HPC members, it wouldn't be a big thing to make the rear wall a parapet wall
That's what I was,
that didn't reflect the roof slope.
yeah, that's exactly what I'm suggesting.
With rubber roofing, it's not a significant cost issue to do something like that.
Would it be a drainage issue? Is that one outside of structure? Might need to talk to your architect.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out how to solve this,
Yeah.
again, financial puzzle, and by taking this roof here, as I mentioned, it'd be a savings around $25,000-$30,000,
Right. But,
right?
and
How
that's
about this building?
That's a considerable amount of money, but I think, having basically a 5-foot high parapet wall that actually, essentially tapers down to nothing, you're talking about, essentially a wall of, if you average the height, it's a 2.5 foot tall wall, parapet wall, which, I can't imagine that's going to be, it's going to cost something, sure, but it's not going to eat that far into the $25,000 savings, I don't think.
I couldn't comment. I wouldn't have thought 5-foot difference here would be almost $100,000. So I don't, that point is I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here wondering if the 5-foot dimension was a result of walkway considerations, or, did that come into it, which I'm guessing it did, or could that have been a 1-foot thing and still maintain the same fire separation?
I
But
can't answer that.
then it would be a weird.
Yeah, I imagine the 5, yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
the
Yes.
only reasonable approach
Right.
would be to have a walkway through there.
Correct.
Yeah, 5 was code, I believe.
Kind of cuts down a lot on your square footage of what's available and the width of what's available inside.
I mean, the
does.
positive, his neighbor did fix, after the fire and tearing down of the 14 West, he did renovate his side of the wall last year. So,
Yeah, it looks good.
yeah, so it being exposed is not a detriment that it might have been before.
Yeah, that part I don't have a problem with, because if you look over on Winter Street,
Sure.
there's a similar, walkway between, a couple of buildings on the south side of the street, and it's fine. So, I don't think that's going to be an issue, at least not for me, but.
You'll probably end up getting pedestrian traffic, even though the alley is only one building further away.
If we did not put some sort of fencing there, you're right.
It might be a convenience
Well,
access to your
I wouldn't
building.
walk through there if it was open.
And with what happened there, unfortunately, this separates the two owners where, it won't impact him if something occurs to this building like it did the last one. Because he just spent a lot of money on that new sidewall.
Well, even if it just has the appearance of a walkway and you close it off,
Right.
I don't have a problem with it, because if you don't close it off, you're going to have people that are just going to go down there and interrupt your
Right.
patrons' dinner,
Correct.
so.
Correct.
I don't know, it doesn't seem like that would be,
Well, you're going to put a fence across the entire front of it?
Just, as it says here, yeah.
So that would that go to Jack's wall?
As it's drawn now with the
So
city, yes.
From the front, nobody could go in the back. It'd
Yeah,
just be from
so
the
it
back.
almost would make sense
well,
to
I
put
guess
a
if
fence in
somebody
the
then
back.
came in through the back and
Right.
didn't have a gate there, you could just force them to, buy dinner before you let them out.
Cap-
It might be a good way to get extra business.
That's his mouse trap, I think.
Might be onto something.
You guys were in here before and you had that temporary vestibule issue with 12 West.
Mhm.
And now that you have that additional setback with the other building, did you give any thought to like solving that problem?
With the vestibule in front of 12 West, is that what you're asking?
Right, I mean, you have a setback with your new building. Did you give any thought to using that as like a separate entryway to 12 West to kind of alleviate having a vestibule, because that vestibule's in the public right away right now?
It is, it serves us a great purpose. And the other side is one of our largest areas for seating, so that we would lose that if we came in through this area. We have a 6 tabletop, which can fit up to 9, and then a 4 right beside, so that's 13, which makes up about 28% of our seating capacity. We only have 38 seats inside. So we didn't think about it. If we did, that's probably immediately what we jumped to, is the doorway in and out would take away seats.
Well, plus I got the distinct impression from the applicant that they're relying on operating 2 different facilities with maybe a different menu and
Yes,
different characteristics.
that's correct.
So 2 front doors, I guess, makes sense.
Yeah.
We never have had a follow-up meeting on the findings of the canvas alcove enclosure follow-up, I don't think, have we?
No, we haven't.
Well, first of all, I wonder, does this fall into the category of an informal review or a minor amendment? I'm sitting here trying to think, is this a substantial enough change from the previous proposal that this now becomes a different design requiring different approval?
My opinion is yes. I mean, it's substantially changing the footprint of the building, it's substantially changing the massing of the building from at least several elevations. So to me, I think that's a different building.
Well, okay, and then if that's the case, I didn't hear anybody chiming in, but if that's the case, can we take care, do we have enough information at hand that we can grant approval of the new design at this meeting so that they can get on with their schedule?
If I could comment right there, schedule
Absolutely.
is, it's of paramount importance at this time. We hope to be working with 2K Builders here in Delaware. And their fall schedule is quite booked. I know that's no one's, nothing you guys can control or members can control, but they're quite booked, and it would be very helpful if we could, at least be able to start moving forward. If we had comments or changes, I can look into the, increased, I don't know how to describe the wall, as member mentioned, I can look into that and see what that could cost, but it would be very helpful for us if we could start moving forward based on their schedule.
Well, then let me ask Lance, if all the elements for approval of what really is a totally new design, do we have enough information in hand that we could approve this new approach as that's the same case, it's just a revised design for this property. Do we have what we need to?
From staff's position, if the commission was favorable for this, for them to move forward, our thought was the architect provide drawings and we could bring it in front of you, Roger, for administrative approval as we move forward. If the commission, staff would be willing to do that.
How does the rest of the commission that's here feel about that?
I would like to see it move forward. I mean, it's you know, an eyesore right there, and it's got to be a financial drain too right now.
I'm fine if the drawings are brought forth for admin approval.
We have construction drawings now. We're kind of waiting for this meeting tonight to see how the commission felt, but we can, if get the green light, you know, we'll start hopefully, I'll be in touch with the architect tomorrow to get final plans drawn up. And we can share that.
Time is money. I understand your issue.
I'm not an architectural expert, but it looks better than a vacant lot to me.
I think it looks very nice.
Thank you.
Thanks to Mr. Root for
Right.
what really is a pretty confident architectural model.
And I apologize about the one table that was out. We got an overzealous 3-year-old customer that thought he could take one of the tables home. So
Well, I thought that kind of led it right into the entry.
maybe that's what he
That
was
was
thinking.
intentional. You may have a designer on your hands. So.
We might.
Dave, one question on the previous approval. One of the recommendations, I guess, was that the front facade, the siding, the cement board siding would have a textured wood grain. How keen are you to have the textured wood grain as opposed to a smooth finish on that?
And tell me again where that would be. if
The
you
front
will.
elevation of the building where you're going to have the lap siding.
This area.
Right. Just historically, generally, it's always, when, the wood fronted buildings generally were built, they would use a smooth sided, a smooth finished siding. So from the standpoint of at least fitting with precedents downtown, smooth siding would actually be more in keeping with that than wood grain. So I guess the question is, this specifies wood grain siding. Is that something that you are, is important to you guys to have?
If it's, I'd have to look at the cost comparisons.
It should be just flipping the board one side to
It's,
the other.
it's insignificant cost-wise. I should just fill in the crack in the conversation. Fake embossed wood grain on synthetic building materials basically makes anybody with a sensitivity to historic preservation, that makes their teeth hurt. It's fake. It's like seeing fake plastic shutters on a historic house.
If it's as you describe, and I'm sure it is, I just don't have a mental image of it. If it's flipping the boards, I don't see.
Yeah, I think from a cost standpoint, it's nil. It's negligible.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that.
What is the material intended to be on the other exterior walls? The west side, the north side, and the east side?
I believe we were considering either between the metal, which we already have existing on the wall here on 12 West, on the west wall of 12 West, either that metal or if the hardy plank can be done, putting that in as well.
Similar to what's going to be on the
Similar to what's on the
South.
front. It all depends on the budget. I know on this back area here, it will be enclosed. I say back area here, I apologize. So the northeast wall facing Sun Thurman will face into our lot. It'll be our walk-in cooler, so no, it won't be exposed. So we'll probably do metal for sure there.
If we approve this based on administrative approval, I think it's fair warning to the rest of the commission and the applicant that I think that metal siding, that vertical metal siding is really inappropriate to a historic downtown. It didn't bother me much because you were covering an unfortunate, unexpected opening in the side of your building.
That's the real culprit in all this is the old building. You know, it got to a point where it had to be torn down. If I could have had an existing building, you know, this will be 4 times the cost of my current. That's some people think I'm crazy, but that's what we're doing. And so that's one way to look at it. What we're doing here costs 4 times what we did here.
That is amazing, but that's the distinction between new construction and rehabilitation of existing.
You're correct. Yeah.
And you may have some appreciation for the position of Mr. Manos in the recent past, being informed that his building was not savable and had to be torn down.
We learned that the hard way when his chimney fell on our kitchen. So we'll you know, we've been sort of members of this community now we'll be on July 10th of this year, we'll be entering our 4th year. And as you know, I like to affectionately say we've built 2 restaurants and have 1 standing, but we've built 2 here. And so we're committed to trying to make sure that it's as aesthetically and historically pleasing as we can, as we financially can.
Yeah, it's a great location for you, and it, in one sense, it's a really good opportunity to have this vacant lot appear right next to your existing business. On the other hand, as you've learned, it's a challenge to meet modern codes. And
it's a scary proposition, knowing I say I always have to build a house. You got to build a house that you can afford the mortgage, and that's what we're trying to do. And
Well, there are a lot of changes here, and I think you brought up the siding. Lance, am I correct in, especially when I read the packet earlier and just kind of re-going over it, am I correct in thinking that the approval back in November was for, the split face
Yes.
masonry construction for
That's my understanding, yeah.
for the west, east, and rear elevation? So, I get that you're trying to economize, and that may not be that's not the material that you're going to be able to go with, and that's where you're trying to get your $90,000 savings. But I do have to agree with the chairman. I would be concerned about the metal siding being visible. If it's the the cement board, I don't have a problem with going to that.
Could I ask
the metal siding? I think would be a real issue.
Could I ask a question on that? So you're talking about the metal siding or the
Right.
What's the other material called?
Hardy plank, cement board, cementatious board.
what
So
what
we'll
what
say
you're
hardy
talking
plank.
about using on the front facade,
Okay.
basically.
Since the 16 West William Street building covers more than what's shown here, but covers, I don't know, a half, 2/3, whatever it is, would it be agreeable if the area that is exposed, hardy plank? If there is some significant difference between, if it's not that much of a, do the whole thing, but it's only exposed probably the back third.
Oh, I think though, with the creation of the 5-foot alley, though, it's going to be, more than that. And again, I think it's a pretty high trafficked area back there. So I'm just
Can you describe high traffic? Is
well,
one
I can
back
tell
there every
you,
day?
I can tell you, I live over, I guess, north of the downtown.
Mhm.
And when my friends and I, or my neighbors and I are coming downtown, we will come down, Franklin if we're heading over to our, anything toward the intersection or the near vicinity of William Street and Sandusky. I think we come down Lincoln, we usually cut through the city parking lot there and use the public alley. So, I mean, it's a pretty visible area from those public, from those public areas. And I see people in there. I mean, there are people back there all the time. It's probably one of the primo parking areas downtown. So, I mean, it gets a lot of people. And so it is part, of the visible landscape downtown. And we're talking about, a lot of significant changes. The metal siding is, it's not in keeping with, the types of materials that are in the historic guidelines. It looks like barn siding, frankly.
As fair warning to the commissioners that are here and the applicant, if this gets approved and is based on administrative approval, I'm probably going to be, the planning director and I are probably going to be the two that approve it, and I'm not going to approve the metal siding for that, the side and rear. Honestly, I can't imagine that a stud wall with hardy plank is going to be significantly more expensive than the same stud wall with the metal siding. But I haven't done the exact cost study, so.
Okay.
But that's my attitude about the metal siding downtown.
What we're talking about is approving the amendments to the case, subject to administrative review, and then
Yes.
that's up to him, I guess, later, if it doesn't get approved.
What, Mr. Chairman, what if we approve tonight and in a month from now I can come back and I could share with you the cost? I don't know what we're talking about.
We didn't want to hold you up.
Right, that's what I'm saying. If we could give-
I'll get moved.
Yeah, if we could get approval tonight, and I will make a commitment, as I've done, is, bring back and share with you what the cost difference is. If it's,
Or,
I don't want to pick a number, but if it's not, 5,000 or less or something in that range, fine. But if it's 25, 35, then I think we ought to discuss it.
If I heard you correctly, you're willing to approve this. Any differences, if you put metal on, you want them to come back in front of the commission for
I'm just,
for the 7 members to
essentially, I'm
approve it.
just saying that I
Okay.
feel strongly enough about the metal barn siding that it doesn't belong in a historic district downtown that basically is from the 1850s to the 1900s.
So you'd bring that back in front of the commission and
So
see what the wish of
I-
the commission.
I won't administratively approve the new plan with the metal siding. So if that's an issue, we ought to know it
I think
now.
we can, as a commission, give you the authority
Right.
to do the administrative approval, and then it wouldn't have to come back to the
Right.
commission. It would just be the understanding that he's
Right.
gonna do a
Yeah. What I'm hearing, if it's not metal, there's a good chance you'll approve it. If it's metal, you won't approve it. He'd have to come back in front of
Accurate.
in front of the commission and have to get
That's
the
true.
appropriate votes to allow it.
That's fair.
That
And
that
hopefully
gets
you-
you going.
Yeah.
And hopefully you know your numbers in the next few weeks. The next
Right.
meeting's a month from now, you'll have time to,
Yeah.
if needed, to go in front of it.
Correct.
And the administrative approval is a mechanism whereby the applicant doesn't have to come back in front of a pre-scheduled HPC meeting. The planning director, Mr. Eflin, and the chairman of the HPC, which is now me, get together and say, well, yeah, that's pretty much what we can approve that. That's what administrative approval is. And over the last, 10 years, I'd say, we have saved, by having administrative approval, we've saved an enormous amount of time and energy on the applicant's behalf over the years on projects, because it's an abbreviation that gets the projects moving. That's the function.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Okay, so we're basically talking about, in lieu of split face block on the west, north, and east elevations, alternate materials subject to administrative approval.
Yeah.
Hardy plank.
I've been kind of writing a sample motion with a motion to approve the amendments to case 2016-2532, subject to administrative staff review. Would that be a
Yes.
correct motion?
That'd be appropriate, yes.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I would just, before we do that though, I would just like to at least, review all the substantial changes that are, proposed, just so that we're all on the same page.
That's a
And then-
good idea.
And then I think, we're ready for the motion.
The changes we have are Dave and Diane reviewed this and wrote this, not myself.
Okay, so if you
This is
want
the
to,
first
can you
time.
just, why don't, if you
Create,
go through.
the first one is create a 5-foot setback west of the property, on the west property line.
Yeah.
The building will be 17 and a half feet from the public walk. Install a gate across the front, which would somewhat achieve compliance with a wall where they couldn't get through, couldn't walk through, have the gate go from 12 west to 16 west,
Mhm.
There is no 16 west.
where Mr.
It's
Pickett
18 and 20.
18, what? Build a sloped roof in place of a flat roof from east to west. Hardy plank will be installed on the south, west, and north elevations instead of metal siding. He will have metal on the east elevation that faces his building. Unless you want to strike that.
Could you flip the model around, please,
Mhm.
Dave?
And you can't see it from the model, but there's fencing here.
I don't want to see any more of that
Okay.
metal siding.
Okay.
And
And no metal.
this, I'm assuming these are all stud walls that we're talking about, wood frame stud walls. You're not going to have to hang siding on a concrete block wall.
No.
Is that accurate?
I couldn't,
I'd make that assumption too.
Well, I mean, that's the only way that you
Right.
could have saved $90,000 by changing that wall,
Right.
is changing the construction of it.
Right.
I'm just an assumption.
The other one is metal fence post in place of the stone columns for patio fencing running the width of the property.
So that's pretty much everything in Lance.
So I have, is the sidewalk patio on 12 West remaining? Is that the intent for that to remain?
yes.
Okay.
And of those changes, I mean, like the 17 and a half feet from the sidewalk, is that different from what Jim submitted and passed last year?
I'm not sure.
Because I like,
I'm looking at the
21,
drawing,
I thought, yeah.
and I think it's very small here, but I think it says 16 feet, 8 inches.
is what Mr. Manis had, and I have 17 and a half.
So then yours went from, so you went from his 16 to 21 as originally in the original, because in some reference, one, and you were changing it to 17.
I
I believe.
We've changed it
I
to
don't know.
17, but
23, okay.
I guess what I'm trying to get to, we've got two changes
Yeah.
that are significant, or two changes that are different from Mr. Manis's. Everything else was kind of like the patio, whether it's 16 or 17, that concept's been presented.
Yeah.
So we've got two changes.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're bringing the facade closer than a previous
Than the
version of
previous
it, which I
approval.
think is better, so.
I mean,
from
put
a-
minimum, if I'm hearing correctly, they put minimum 16 feet, because if it's less than 17, it'd be 16.
Yeah.
Then you have some play area.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's pretty much it.
Those were apparently the revisions from the past approval, is what Diane put together.
It's complicated. All right,
do we have a motion on the floor?
Kyle, I think you were,
I make a motion to approve the amendments to case 2016-2532, subject to administrative staff review.
Can you be heard on the recording?
I'm going to repeat it.
Sure.
I will make a motion to approve the amendments to case 2016-2532, subject to administrative staff review.
second.
Motion by Mr. Rohrer and second by Mr. Coleman. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, call roll, please.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Ms. Riviera,
Yes.
Councilman Rohr,
Yes.
and Chairman Koch.
Yes. Dave, thank you for your continuing effort to turn a missing tooth in our downtown into something that's functional and enjoyable. And I had an engineer I worked with that used the word functionable. Thanks. Appreciate
you,
your
Mr. Chairman.
persistence and looking forward to a new entry in the downtown eateries.
We are too. We'll keep pushing. Thank you for your support. Thanks to the members.
You put that thing back up on the side behind the bar. Were you ever in Weston that was open?
No.
Like the band people from coming in, they had all those different little acronyms. You remember
I don't frequent all the bars. I don't know.
that? I only went in there one time, but it was
Yeah.
really funny.
They all say that, don't they?
They had a list of people who were banned from the bar, and beside their name, they had a bunch of letters, and it was like, you know, like NNA, like no, not, never, ever again. They had different acronyms for these different people's names. I assume
I stopped going in there when I got banned.
it was kind of funny.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Very
Dave.
much.
Appreciate
Really
your
do
efforts.
Appreciate it.
Okay, item 4 on the agenda is commission member comments and discussion. Are there any? How are we coming with our perpetual sign code enforcement?
Reactive as always, but we're trying to stay on top of it as much as we can.
Anybody
I
else?
think
got
we're
any?
getting a better handle on it as we progress over the years.
Any other commission member comments or discussion?
I got nothing.
The only thing I have is it's wonderful to walk downtown and see everybody sitting outside enjoying the city.
I've had several opportunities recently to review the improvements in downtown Delaware since the HPC was done and with the historic district, and we began to make the most out of what we had. I don't know anybody who has any familiarity with Delaware who doesn't think that the downtown is thriving and an enjoyable place to be, multiple places to eat, drink, do some shopping. We still have our movie theater. I think it's been a miraculous turnaround, and it makes me fairly proud that I've been involved with the HPC and the historic district from the beginning, and I'm pretty happy about the results.
Well, I tell you, I am constantly just really amazed and pleased to hear people that live outside of town, you know. I was just having dinner with a couple of old friends from my guard unit that live south of town, and they just can't believe how cool downtown Delaware is. I've got a sister who lives down in Upper Arlington that was just, you know, just talking about just how wonderful it is coming up here, you know, to visit. I mean, Delaware's done a lot, and I know the city has, you know, worked very hard to help facilitate that. And I'll give another nod. I think, you know, the things that the city does to encourage, you know, things like the Arts Festival, the New Moon Half Marathon, the triathlon. I was just looking at the number where people were from that just did the triathlon, and probably 90% of those people are from outside of Delaware, well outside of Delaware. And I think it's just a great thing to, you know, that the city supports those things, that brings people in from downtown. And I constantly hear about people that are discovering what a great place this is and what an up and coming place it is. And I think the city deserves a lot of credit for helping to promote it.
Anything else? Now, the item 5 on the agenda is to announce that the next regular meeting is going to be July 26, 2017, unless it's called off. So I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rohr, second by Mr. Coleman. I think by Robert's Rules of Order, that makes us adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.